Madam President, last week, the President addressed a joint session of Congress. And he said he wanted to eliminate regulations. He said regulations, he said, that put, quote, an unnecessary burden on businesses at a time when they can least afford it. And that's the end of the President's quote. You know, we've heard this same message from the White House time and time again. The rhetoric coming out of this White House simply hasn't matched the reality. In fact, Washington continues to roll out red tape each day, and the red tape makes it harder and more expensive for the private sector to create jobs in this country. The President also said that his administration has identified, he said, over 500 reforms to our regulatory system, he said, that would save billions of dollars over the next few years. While I appreciate that the White House has identified wasteful regulations, it won't really help our economy unless the White House repeals them. In January, this White House has only repealed, since January, he's only repealed one single regulation, and it has to do with actually spilt milk. And as the President's new plan does nothing really to fix the regulatory burdens faced by our job creators, it actually adds to the burdens of the job creators of this country. The President has tried to justify this increasing avalanche of red tape, and he said he doesn't want to, quote, choose between jobs and safety. Well, in today's regulatory climate, that choice is a false choice. Washington's wasteful regulations aren't keeping Americans safe from dangerous jobs. The American people can't find jobs because no one is safe from the regulations coming out of Washington. For every step that our economy tries to take forward, Washington's regulations continue to stand in the way. Federal agencies' funding has increased 16% over the past 3 years. Well, our economy has only grown 5% over these same 3 years. Washington's regulatory burden is literally growing 3 times faster than our own economy. This massive increase in Washington's power has only made the economy worse. Americans know that regulating our economy makes it harder and more expensive for the private sector to create jobs. The combined cost of the new regulations being imposed by this administration just last month was over $9 billion. Much of this cost has been borne by America's energy producers and has cost American workers thousands of red, white, and blue jobs. Now, those who try to justify these policies claim that they will help us to create green jobs at some unknown time in the future. Our economy, our job market, is not a seesaw. Pushing one part down doesn't make the other side pop up. This administration's out-of-control regulation is persistently dragging down large portions of our economy. The President has promised to stop this kind of overreach. You'll remember that he issued an executive order at the start of this year that was supposed to slow down Washington's regulation. So, what has this administration done about it? Well, in the 7 months since the President issued his executive order, hundreds and hundreds of new rules have been either enacted or proposed. For every day that goes by, our job creators face at least one new Washington rule to follow. When the President announced his executive order, he said that he wanted to, quote, promote predictability and reduce uncertainty. Laudable goals. Well, a new rule every day does nothing to promote predictability and is the very definition of uncertainty. The President talked about uncertainty just recently. The main source of uncertainty in the economy right now is Washington's regulations. Yet there is not a single sentence about regulations in the President's address just this week. And to make things worse, the people most victimized by this uncertainty are the very people that the President claims he wants to help. The President said last year that when it comes to job creation, He wants to, as he said, quote, start where most new jobs do. He said, with small businesses. Well, the sentiment is right. But again, what has he done about it? According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, businesses with fewer than 20 employees, well, they incur regulatory costs that are 42% higher than larger businesses with up to 500 employees. And that's not even counting the avalanche of new regulations that will come down the road. This year, over 50,000 pages of regulations have been added to the Federal Register already. And the Chamber of Commerce has said that the President's new health care law alone will produce 30,000 pages of new health care regulations, many aimed at small employers. The President has said that he will keep trying every new idea that works, he said. And he said, and listen to every good proposal no matter which party comes up with it. Well, I have a pretty simple idea. If the President wants to know which proposals will work to create jobs, maybe he should require his regulatory agencies to tell him how their own actions will affect the job market. Congressman Terry Lee of Nebraska and I have a bill that will do just that. It is called the Employment Impact Act, Senate Bill 1219. This bill will force Washington to look before it leaps when it comes to regulation that could hurt Americans' jobs. Under our bill, every regulatory agency would be required to prepare what is called a Jobs Impact Statement. And this Jobs Impact Statement would need to be prepared with every new rule that is proposed. The statement would include a detailed assessment of the jobs that would be lost or gained or sent overseas by any given rule coming out of Washington. It would consider whether new rules would have a bad impact on our job market in general. This Jobs Impact Statement would also include an analysis of any alternative plans that might be better for the economy. And most importantly, it would require regulatory agencies to look at how new rules might interact with other proposals coming down the road. The problem with our regulations is not only that they're too sweeping, it is also that there are too many of them. So it makes no sense to look at an individual rule in a vacuum and enacting hundreds of them without knowing their cumulative effect of all of these together could spell death by 1,000 cuts for hardworking Americans who are trying to work and support their families. Also, in keeping with the principles of transparency, this bill would require every Jobs Impact Statement prepared by a federal agency to be made available to the public. The American people deserve to know what their government is actually doing. And federal agencies in Washington need to learn to think before they act. Requiring statements from these agencies on what their regulations will do is nothing new. For 40 years, the federal government has always required its bureaucrats to ask the question of whether their actions will impact America's environment. Have to file environmental impact statements. What I'm asking for here is a jobs impact statement. Past generations of legislators rightly recognize the importance of America's land and air and water, but it's important that we recognize the importance of America's working families as well. America's greatest resource, our natural resource, is the American people. And we are talking about people who want to work, are willing to work, are looking for work, and yet cannot find a job. The Employment Impact Act will force Washington bureaucrats to realize Americans are much more interested in growing our nation's economy than they are in growing our government. So I'm going to continue to fight, Madam President, to see that the Employment Impact Act is passed and signed into law to help get Americans working again. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.